Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am not Devin Foster, but I am excited to be here for another episode of Talent Experience Live. My name is John Deal, and the episode you're about to watch is from a recorded conversation at I Am Phenom, our annual conference on all things talent. In this conversation, Devin speaks with Jason Bartouche and Elizabeth Crowfoot from Lightcast, a global leader in labor market analytics. They discuss how skills provide essential context in decision-making to shape talent strategies, especially since companies are emphasizing their relevance in attraction, retention, and mobility. Enjoy the discussion.
Well, welcome both of you to Talent Experience Live. It's tradition on the program. I always find it interesting how folks get into human resources simply because I have a daughter, so our friends and everyone are starting to do, the first day of school things. What do you want to be when you grow up? Never have I heard work in human resources or in that industry. So I think everyone has kind of a windy path, and I'd love to hear how you both got into the industry. We'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, great. So I'm actually a labor economist by training. I started my career at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so producing our national compensation data. But from there, I transitioned to the conference board, and that's where I was working with HR leaders, CHROs, talent acquisition, strategic workforce planning, practitioners, and that's where the conversation was around talent shortages, talent gaps. And that's really where I fell into it in terms of my interest in just trying to educate and, especially from more of a macro view, I take sort of the big picture and just trying to, educate, enlighten, and give context around the labor market to HR leaders.
Yeah. It's funny, no matter what journey anyone has, they always describe it as falling into it or like it found me. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, mine's not as direct as Elizabeth's. So no, I went to college and I graduated and I thought I wanted to be a college administrator. Okay. And I spent 7 years working in higher ed. Spent 4 years at the UW in Seattle, actually at the same time, while Elizabeth was a student. And then I moved to New York City and I got a job for Columbia. And I thought that was it. And I remember having a conversation with the dean of the business school. I was working at the business school at the time. And he was like, hey, Jason, if you want to work in higher ed, you need to be a practitioner, meaning you need to come to the classroom with real world experience. And so I left New York and I came back to Phoenix, which is where I grew up. And I had some conversations with some college friends. And a bunch of them were working for a big headhunter firm called Robert Half. Yep. And I went in for a conversation which I thought I was going to chat with one of my friends, but it was actually an interview. And so I walked in and I met with the branch manager for one of the local offices of Robert Half in Phoenix, ended up getting the job, and that was what started. I was in staffing and recruiting for a couple of years, started a staffing firm like so many people do. That failed. And then I got a job working, my first HR tech job was working for a small payroll reseller. So I was selling payroll and time and attendance and a couple of other things. And then that just kind of led to a bunch of jobs in HR tech. And I've been in the field for 20 years now.
The staffing tentacles are everywhere.
They are.
That's where I met my wife was when I was working in staffing.
Yeah.
She's still there, and she loves it. And I'm like, all right, you're either a lifer or it's not for you.
Yeah, no, when I was at Half, you were either there for 20 years or 6 months.
Exactly.
I was there for 2 years, and it was I'm out.
You're like, I don't know what to do here. I got to get out of here. Awesome. Well, I loved hearing about that. Obviously, you're both at Lightcast now. Yeah. How did you kind of end up at Lightcast, and was there anything around what Lightcast does, the core functions, the purpose, anything along those lines that really drew you into that?
Yeah. Well, do you want to go first, or you want me to?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, while I was at the conference board, I was using a lot of the data from Burning Glass Technologies and MZ in my conversations with HR leaders around skills, sort of as a way to address a lot of talent shortages. And when they merged, I was like, I love what MZ does. I love what Burning Glass Technologies does. I need to be part of this company. So for me, that was sort of a pivotal light bulb moment where I was like, I need to be part of this organization because it embodies everything that I have been, talking about with leaders. And so that's luckily everything worked out and I'm here. And so, it's been great and I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was a part of the Career Builder crew. So many of those folks are now at Phenom. And I was there for 11 years or so. And Career Builder had acquired MZ, which is one half of, it's probably worth for the audience that Burning Glass and Lightcast were two separate companies. We merged in the summer of 2021. Okay. We were both acquired by KKR. And then about a year later, just in 2022, we rebranded the new company as Lightcast. Okay. So Career Builder bought MZ in like 2012, which was 2 years after I got there. And so I got to know MZ for the course of 6-7 years or so during that mutual ownership period. And then as Career Builder was going through its many iterations post-acquisition, I decided to come and work for MZ full-time and start up their partner program. Yeah. So
Awesome. Now, core functionality skills, right?
Yeah.
And I want to, number one, find out your methodology and thought process around skills at Lightcast. But after that, I'd love to hear, you mentioned 2012, right? It's been around for a while.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're at I Am Phenom, and skills are everywhere.
Yeah.
They're the huge topic of conversation. So I'd love to hear maybe about how the core strategy has changed and how much the conversation has ramped up.
Sure. A couple things. I'll start by saying, so at Lightcast, we define ourselves as a talent intelligence provider. Yep. Our tagline is the global standard for talent intelligence. Now, if you read Burson's articles, you'll realize that talent intelligence is extremely vague and it's very all-encompassing. So what does that mean for Lightcast? It means that we aggregate people and jobs data from all around the globe. Our employers use that data to help them make informed talent acquisition and talent management decisions. The lens by which we allow employers to view the external labor market is through skills. And I know I'm thinking back, my head's going to your questions, but when we think about why skills now, what's funny about it, and I don't want to say Lightcast was a trendsetter, but we created and open sourced the first skill taxonomy back in 2019. And so this isn't kind of a newer conversation for us. It's just newer in terms of how employers are realizing how they can use skills to make them, or I should say help them, make informed build, buy, and borrow decisions. Yeah. And so if anything, I think it's just put Lightcast at the epicenter of this conversation because we've been defining the labor market through the lens of skills for a generation. Mm-hmm. And it's just now to the point where I think the conversation is at a point where employers are realizing that if I define jobs at their most granular level, which is skills, then I can start to understand how positions and individuals relate to one another. Yeah. And that's where the conversation of mobility, I know that's not a new conversation, but the conversation of mobility as it pertains to now, which is employers very focused on retention and talent development. If I'm looking at my people and my positions through a common language of skills, it allows me to understand the connectedness between them.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you've said it all.
Sorry, Elizabeth. I stole your thunder.
No, not at all. No, I think just to double down on that, I mean, that's it's also practical and pragmatic. You do go down to that granular level, but it's something that's actionable. And that's what HR leaders need, is they need to be able to also communicate that to other parts of the organization, whether it's procurement in terms of borrowing talent, or the CFO in terms of compensation, and skills is sort of that tangible asset that sort of turns into we can go into ROI discussions later, but sort of can also be more common in terms of spreading that just the importance of skills throughout the organization.
Yeah. The other thing I would add is, again, skills in and of themselves aren't new. It's just the next evolution of talking about jobs, right? Yeah. Before it was competency models, which there are many legacy competency models and job architecture frameworks. Skills is just a new way to think about something that we've been talking about in the employer space for, since IBM developed the framework 20 years ago.
Yeah. It makes sense. I think back to, early days of me applying to jobs and things like that. Requirements, right? Proficient in Microsoft Excel. Sorry to anyone who thought that I was. I am not. But, these things, that's a skill, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're maybe not focusing on the job title as much and focusing on those core competencies, as you mentioned. but on such a granular level that you're able to find the right person, right? Just because someone has product marketing manager in their title doesn't mean they can do it at your organization from maybe a technology perspective. I have conversations all the time. Do you use Slack or do you use Teams? Do you use any of these other communication tools? Gmail, Outlook, Office, right? And the speed that's needed for an organization to move quickly, we know that we focused so heavily on the candidate experience, getting people to apply quickly, but then there's a onboarding process and that sort of stuff. So you really want an individual, especially if it's a tough to fill role, to hit the ground running, right? And really fill your needs immediately. We talked, I kind of alluded to it there, but I want to get your opinion. The shift has happened. We're talking about skills now in the forefront. There's outside, I think you can get a skills warrior card that it almost looks like a Pokemon card. It's all AI done. I don't think that's driving the conversation for sales, to be completely honest. It's been here before. What do you think the industry why is the industry really focused on them now? And why is it on every HR blog, on news articles and everything like that?
Let me take that one first.
Go.
From sort of, again, we'll do macro and then we'll go down.
I'm sorry.
No. Only because, again, I look at everything sort of from a macro perspective, being a labor economist. And I think, like you mentioned, we've been talking about skills for a long time. And my first conversations are really around skills-based organization, I think started around like 2017, 2018, 2019, when the labor market was just as tight as it is today. And people forget that pre-pandemic times, I mean, we were having the same conversations, just not in the context of a pandemic, right? So that's, I think, when employers started to think about the talent shortages that they were happening and what's, again, a pragmatic way that I can solve that problem. So to me, that's sort of the evolution is in terms of just the tightness of the labor market. And then now we're seeing all these demographic shifts and headwinds, right? We have retiring baby boomers. Also in 2025, we're going to see a maximum in terms of the number of high school graduates. So we're going to be squeezed on both sides of the age spectrum, and employers are starting to realize, oh, my labor supply is going to be more limited.
It's finite.
Yes. Yeah. What am I going to do? How am I going to address this problem? Skills sort of seems to be at the forefront as a way to address all of these challenges.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, I can think about, I'm not going to put Elizabeth and I in the same generational cohort because I found out we were yesterday and I did not know that. But like, from my experience, it feels like employers have had a difficult time over the last 15 years, right? You had the Great Recession, followed, 5-6 years later by the pandemic, followed a couple years later by kind of the Great Resignation, and then whatever you want to define what's going on now. And so the reality is like, employers have actually been transforming their workforce reactively over and over again every 5 years, sometimes less, for like ever. Yeah. and when you think about the power of skills, it's built on flexibility and agility, right? It's the building blocks of a position and a person. And if I look at my workforce through that lens, it allows me to proactively prepare for transformations, but also react with really good information about how I can reposition and redeploy my workforce based on whatever the new next thing is going to be.
Yeah. And I think if you were to look internally at your organization, as companies have been battling these challenges every 5 years, they're A players, right? The folks that they want to hold on to the most are the ones who can wear many hats, right? Who have many skills and aren't just boxed into one particular position. I want to ask you, it seems like organizations are starting to embrace it, Elizabeth, right? They are finally catching on to what you all have been saying for years now. If you were to give them, some words of advice of how to, maybe help the rest of the organization embrace it, because there's always going to be people who say, what do you mean we don't have a job description anymore? Or what do you mean the job title is a lot more vague than it once was? What are some tips and tricks to help them really embrace that change?
Yeah, do you want to take this one?
I can start with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Devin's like, wait, what?
No, you're fine.
No, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, but there's a couple things. Number one, they say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? We're not asking organizations to do away with job titles or position descriptions. In fact, those help us inform what types of skills should be associated or in close relationship to a position. And so if anything, we're just appending what an organization's already doing with additional context to help them make informed decisions about what are the skills we should prioritize for this position. Easiest way to get started is start small, right? Start with a few critical roles. Do a proof of concept with someone like Lightcast, where we can essentially step in and give you a blueprint for what this can look like for just a few positions or a department that matters. Implement it, prove success, and then scale it across the business. The other thing I would add is the technology that Lightcast brings to the table allows organizations to do this at scale, right? Whereas before, the reason organizations don't update their job architecture is because it sucks, right? It's a super tedious job that no one wants to do. So it's the project that's like always number 5 on the list, and it never moves up or down. Right now with scale and with customers, or forgive me, vendors like Lightcast, we can step in and automate and do a lot of that heavy lifting on behalf of the employer, present them with options to make decisions, and then implement at scale.
Yeah, and I think at scale is the key word,
Yeah.
because once you've had that conversation about the proof of concept and you're saying, as an organization, you're like, yes, I need to go in this direction. How am I going to move this like skills-based approach to other parts? That's why at Lightcast, we've developed this maturity model around the skills-based organization, and it really hinges on 4 fundamental pillars that we feel are core to establishing that skill-based organization. It revolves around strategy, making sure your skill strategy is aligned with your talent strategy, is aligned with your business strategy. It's about having the right governance structures in place, about having the right technology and data integrations in place, and then change management, making sure that everybody's aligned, everyone buys in to skills, because if they don't, then the whole thing lays flat and it won't work. So just having those 4 fundamental pillars, that's sort of the core of how we approach the skills-based organization, and then again, being really pragmatic and giving our clients tools and how to move from point A.
And I love that, the pillars, the strategy, and everything. We're talking about this very conceptually right now. It's going to change the world, right? I think for the audience at home, maybe dialing it back a moment, what are the core objectives that we're trying to get at by being a skills-first organization?
Yeah, and I think there are 2 answers to this. There's a short answer and a sort of a longer answer. The short answer, I think, is that there's 3 sort of fundamental use cases, and you alluded to this, Jason, in terms of buy, build, borrow. I mean, obviously, buy is recruiting, right? That's one. Are you finding the right talent? Build, right? You want to also make sure that you're growing your talent internally, and one way to do that is by a focus on skills. Another one is in terms of just future-proofing your workforce, so thinking ahead, like what are the technologies or the projects that are coming down the pipeline, and what are the skills that I need to have internally in order to achieve those goals. That's sort of like the short answer, but in practice, the clients that come to us in terms of their skills-based journey, they're always trying to put out a fire. It's a problem that they're facing and they need a solution. It's either I'm losing competitiveness in the market, I can't bring products to market fast enough, I'm facing potential layoffs. And in each of those cases, it's about let's find the right talent so that you can innovate faster. Let's be able to find strategies so you can redeploy talent from one part of the organization to another part so you can avoid layoffs, which is terrible for your brand, right? So it's all about finding solutions or strategies for these really concrete business problems. So regardless of sort of the conceptual framework, it's always very pointed pain points.
I always say organizations change when it hurts. Right?
Exactly.
And the reality is like nobody does this because it's the right thing to do, even though it is the right thing to do. They're like, hey, my time to fill is astronomically high. Is it that I'm asking for the wrong skills at my position level? It could be. That's what we help them do. I would add, again, going back to theory, I think the ultimate objective is skills-based workforce planning. And that is, if I understand the skills my people have, and I understand the skills that positions require, I can make informed decisions about what skills I acquire and buy from the open market, what skills I focus L&D on, and what skills I use project or contingent labor for. And I can do so effectively based on, things like cost, availability, my willingness to train, and how fast I need someone in the role. Right? That is the ultimate goal, is effectively managing total talent management based on which lever as an organization you want to pull and when.
I think of it as, and this may be a bad example, but a refrigerator, right? You're hungry. All of a sudden you look in your fridge and you're like, this is all I have. Let me make what I can make now. And now I'm going to make a grocery list of what I need in the future. And I was at one point very guilty of that, and I lived off of ramen at one point, which is when change needs to happen, right? When it hurts.
You're like, I can't do this anymore.
Exactly. This is not going to turn out well for me. We obviously, it would be taboo to not bring up the buzzword of what feels like the past year, AI.
Sure.
You are working very closely with organizations, right? You're getting very granular with skills. Are we starting to see certain skills that used to be vital for roles begin to start to still be necessary, but not nearly have the importance that they do because of generative AI and smart sheets like Microsoft Excel and things like that?
When it comes to skills and Gen AI, to be honest, I think that the main fundamental way this is going to change in terms of talent is with L&D, right? The L&D leaders that I've spoken to want to harness AI to the best of their ability and empower their employees to use it responsibly. And we often think about, especially Gen AI, like how is it going to impact the task that I have to do? But really, you can even dig down more granularly and think about the skill. So when I need to compose an email and I go to Gen AI, right, it's not, the skill that it's helping me with is writing, right? So everything boils down to the skill. And that's how L&D leaders can also think about it, is how can Gen AI and other AI tools augment the skills that their employees currently have. And it's sort of thinking about training, right? Training modules, learning programs that focus on teaching employees how to pivot, right? How to incorporate those AI technologies into their day-to-day workflows and processes in order to really optimize and increase productivity. So I look at it from sort of an L&D perspective, and also individually just making sure that they have the right tools and the right communications in place so that they can use it safely and ethically.
I think about it. My old CEO would always talk about how throughout the course of American history there's been changes in technology, and those technologies have made a dramatic increase to individual productivity. And I feel like AI is just that for our generation. And so when I think about using it as an organization, it's about intelligent redeployment. It's about, hey, how can I use artificial intelligence to modify individuals' daily work habits so that they can focus more of their time on where it matters and less on things that artificial intelligence can assist with. But I think it's about, to Elizabeth's point, in our own organization, we had a content writer who decided that she wanted to pursue a new opportunity and do something else. And essentially, we took a look at how we could use AI from a content creation perspective and realized, you know what? We actually don't need that position at this moment, and we're just going to redeploy our resources with our existing content creation team to use AI to accelerate how quickly they can generate content and push it to market. So again, it's just about intelligent redeployment. But again, we wouldn't have come to that conclusion unless we were forced to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add one thing, only because, especially in our data, we see that jobs with AI in the title itself increased like 60% over the last year alone. But like if you think about it, well, titles such as like AI engineer, right, or AI or machine learning engineer, but when we think about sort of the technology that is evolving so fast, this has happened with the internet, right?
Yeah.
You used to have like internet marketers, but we don't call them internet marketers now. They're just marketers.
Yeah.
So this is what's going to happen. Right now, we're going to see a short amount of time where AI is like the focus. It's starting to sort of seep into those titles, the job title directly, but that's going to sort of phase out in the next, several years as it becomes a day-to-day technology that we're all using.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I like the talk of data there. I want to circle back on that, but you mentioned technology changing over the course of generations, and I think of driving a car, right? It used to be all cars were manual. You had to know how to drive stick shift. I don't know how to drive stick shift. No, you don't. I want to. That's like a goal for me.
I can teach you that.
All right, perfect, perfect. And I'm not saying that has made us more productive per se, but it has created this ease of use, which I think is what you're saying, where we can not get time back and start texting and driving because we don't have to have our other hand. But theoretically, we could get.
How can I use my time more effectively?
Yes,
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
course.
Yeah.
However, your example there of a content writer, pursuing a new thing, how important was the data set that you already had when leveraging that?
Yeah.
Because you obviously have a tone of voice.
Yep.
You have
Yeah, it's super interesting that you're asking
a
that.
brand. So I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was talking to Elizabeth about this yesterday when we were preparing for this, and so obviously Lightcast is a big data company, right?
Yeah.
We have over 2 billion current and historic job postings. We have over 1 billion resumes and social profiles. We have 20 billion government labor market data points. It's insane. And so, of course, we've been building LLMs for some time to do a lot of different things. But what we've done more recently is we've started to build some private LLMs that are designed based off of a couple of our thought leaders. Okay. So their content, their tone of voice, et cetera. So essentially we can use these LLMs as if we were talking to them to help us generate ideas for new content in their tone, in their voice, and the same for the company as a whole. Yeah. And I think, again, these are opportunities for organizations to, again, increase output, increase productivity by harnessing technology to hopefully reduce the amount of time that our individuals have to go to Ron and be like, Ron's one of our senior labor economists. Like, stop asking Ron, ask Ron's LLM. And so, that is like our ultimate goal. But of course, it's not replacing Ron.
Yeah.
Right? Ron is the person that has to continue creating content to make the model better and better. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope I will have my own
Yeah,
model someday at
Ask
Lightcast.
Elizabeth.
So
Yeah.
when I've got that check the box, I've made it.
Yeah. I've arrived.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Elizabeth. Yesterday we had a conversation with a client who mentioned co-pilots for recruiters, right? And her bold prediction for 2024, 2025, maybe 2026. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it was that every recruiter will have a co-pilot or an LLM that can not necessarily act on behalf of them, but help them with some of these manual tasks so they can focus on the skills that are vital to their role, the communication skills, the ability to create content, to build on those LLMs and things like that. You mentioned you have vast amounts of data sets, right? I imagine those come from a combination of large and small organizations. Elizabeth, this question may be a bit of a macro one, so I'll start with you. Depending on the size of an organization, does that change their outlook on skills in the future? Like if they're dealing with 10,000 employees versus a startup where, I hate to use this, but you need a scrappy individual who can do a lot of things. How do they look at it differently?
It's an interesting question because we definitely deal with clients of all sizes, and large organizations do have the luxury of being able to really pinpoint very granular skills. But at the same time, they have to have just an equal focus on those foundational skills, especially when they're considering those career pathways, right? Those skill adjacencies that are going to help them in terms of the internal mobility within their own organizations and growing their own talent. But by the same effect, even small organizations, I mean, obviously they need more generalists, right? They all have to wear different hats. But many of those, especially startups, especially in niche technologies like EVs or cloud or other up and coming technologies, they also need very niche skill sets. So they have to also focus on those very specific recruiting dynamics that are going to get this very specific talent that they need in order to produce their products, especially those that are at the frontier of technology. Again, they just need to really hone in on the best talent from wherever they're really recruiting from.
Okay.
So yeah.
No, that makes sense, because as you mentioned, things are changing, but we're all kind of headed in the same direction. This digital age where you mentioned the job descriptions and or job titles, excuse me, how there was an increase of, I don't want
60%.
60% of AI and machine learning. They're all after the same people. So it doesn't matter, where you are in terms of organization of employees and things like that. What are you most enthusiastic about the future? I think because we're talking about this very conceptually and things are happening fast. So is there a light at the end of the tunnel that you see, or is there something in 2024 as early as 2025 that really excites you?
Yeah, I mean, this is a word that came from my current CEO. What excites me is the opportunity for interoperability. And I had to look that up. Yeah. Did not know.
I have no idea.
Yeah. But Lightcast, we're trying to be the universal translator for people in jobs data. And as much as, I appreciate the idea that a lot of technology providers are starting to espouse, which is bring your own skills and we'll make sense of it. At some point, somebody has to be the standard for how skills are defined. Yeah. And more importantly, the context of what that skill represents in the broader labor market. Yeah. Right? I need to understand skills as it pertains to how available is that skill in the population? Is it influencing compensation? Who else is targeting that type of talent? If I don't have that context, then skills are just words that we're using to bullet point positions, and that's not its intent, right? Our intent is to understand how skills will influence our ability to hire and maintain talent, retain talent, and that's the promise of skills. When I think of interoperability, I think of the opportunity that someone like Lightcast or someone like us has in bringing the ecosystem together of HR technology and helping create a standard for how skills should be used across the HR tech stack. One of the analysts asked me at HR Tech this kind of similar question. I think she said, what is nobody talking about that she should? Yeah. And my answer was the same. It's the free flow of data across systems. As much as, Phenom or Workday, et cetera, want a customer to buy their entire product ecosystem, I think the reality of that happening is slim to none. And I think organizations want flexibility, and they don't want to be forced to tie into a single ecosystem. Yeah. And the only way that we can do this and solve the real problems that organizations face today is if we all work together and allow data to freely move from one system to the next. Yeah. So that's my short answer for what excites me.
No, that is exciting. Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, actually, my answer is a little bit different, and it's so trite, but it's about just the possibilities with AI. AI can help you structure unstructured data, and that is what we deal with every day at Lightcast. It's job posting information with a bunch of text. It's employee profiles, either LinkedIn or your internal employee profile. All of that is rich data, and AI models can help you extract all of that information. And at the same time, just the role, like an organization that Lightcast brings, and my upbringing in BLS has really just, to me, made the importance of accuracy and transparency in developing data and models is, to me, just paramount. And the fact that I'm part of an organization that has those same values, especially in the age of AI when garbage in, garbage out, right? We have to focus on making sure that the data that we do provide, whether it's text, whether it's numbers, is sound, it's transparent, it's accurate. And I think that just, again, with just the technological power that we have now with our new AI models, I think it's just really exciting that we can do this faster, better, and more accurately.
Absolutely. Making sense of all of that data and then having it free flow back and forth is going to make everyone's job easier. I'm excited about the future now. I thought of a bunch of analogies as we were going through, everything that you mentioned there of ways to really track. Otherwise, they're just words. And I'm not going to share any of them because you did it perfectly. But I want folks to reach out and learn more because I think you're really fighting the good fight, helping folks, helping organizations where they need it and preparing them for the future. So where can folks go to learn more about Lightcast?
Yeah, I mean, of course, anyone can visit our website, lightcast.io. But of course, Elizabeth and I, you can connect with us on LinkedIn.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Connect. We love, having that conversation with anyone who's willing to talk about skills. Yeah.
Perfect. Anything else before we go that you'd like to add that I missed an opportunity for you to talk about that you're truly passionate about?
I don't think so.
No?
I think we covered
All
it
right,
all.
perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time and have a great day.
Thank
thank you.
you.
Awesome.